The human body contains roughly 206 bones. According to witnesses who were present that evening, the sound of a single impact against flesh suggested that every one of them had somehow been touched simultaneously. It should not have been possible. Not against a man of that size. Not against a champion who had taken punishment from the hardest punchers in heavyweight history and remained standing. Yet 300 people, according to later accounts, saw something that defied the established order of combat sports. They saw mass and momentum rendered meaningless in the span of 3 seconds. They saw the impossible become inevitable through a movement so precise that many could not adequately describe what they had witnessed. Even years afterward, the challenge had been brewing for weeks. The heavyweight champion of the world, a man whose hands moved with supernatural speed, despite his size, had grown curious about the martial artist whose reputation had spread through Hollywood and beyond. Muhammad Ali stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 210 pounds of sculpted muscle. His jab had been clocked at speeds that shouldn't have been achievable for a man of his dimensions. He had faced the most dangerous men alive in the ring and emerged victorious through a combination of athleticism, intelligence, and an almost mystical ability to avoid punishment. Bruce Lee stood 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. The mathematics alone suggested absurdity. According to those who witnessed the negotiations, Ali had extended the invitation with characteristic confidence. He wanted to see if Kung Fu was real, or merely elaborate choreography designed for cinema. The challenge spread through media channels, generating 3 weeks of speculation and debate. Most dismissed it as publicity. Some worried about the safety of the smaller man. A few, those who had trained with Lee in private, maintained a curious silence. Lee accepted with conditions that seemed, to observers, almost insulting in their simplicity. 1 strike only. He would stand still. He would strike once. Then it would be finished. The downtown sports arena filled beyond capacity on that February evening. Witnesses later recalled an atmosphere thick with anticipation and skepticism in equal measure. Men entered the space wearing white shorts and red gloves, creating a stark contrast that would burn itself into memory. The size difference when both men climbed through the ropes appeared even more pronounced than the statistics suggested. Ali towered over Lee. The champion's shoulders were twice as broad. His arms contained more muscle in the bicep alone than Lee's entire upper arm. They met at center ring. Guards dropped. According to multiple accounts, Ali spread his arms wide in invitation. He was grinning, witnesses said, the same expression he wore before dismantling opponents with combinations that blurred the line between science and art. He told Lee to take his best shot. He would not block. He would not move. He would absorb whatever the martial artist could generate and then demonstrate why boxing ruled the world of combat. The arena fell silent. 300 people leaned forward. According to later testimonies, the quiet became so absolute that the sound of breathing seemed amplified. Lee stood 3 feet away, hands relaxed at his sides. His posture suggested nothing. No telegraphing of intention. No visible preparation. He might have been waiting for a bus, one witness would later remark. He might have been contemplating the weather. 3 seconds passed. Each one, according to those present, felt elongated beyond natural duration. Ali maintained his position, arms spread, chin presented as a target. His eyes, witnesses claimed, showed the supreme confidence of a man who had been hit by the hardest punchers in boxing and remained conscious. He had taken shots from Sonny Liston, from Joe Frazier, from men who could break ribs with a glancing blow. What could this small man possibly show him that he had not already absorbed and conquered? Then Lee moved. The witnesses disagreed on the specifics. Some swore they saw his hand travel in a straight line from his hip to Ali's solar plexus. Others claimed the strike came from below, rising like a piston through layers of muscle and sinew. A few insisted they saw nothing at all, merely a flicker of motion followed by consequence. What they agreed upon was the sound, not the dull thud of glove against flesh that boxing produced, but something sharper, more penetrating, as if the impact had bypassed the surface entirely and spoken directly to the skeleton beneath. Ali's eyes changed first. The confidence vanished, replaced by something witnesses struggled to articulate. Not pain, exactly. Not surprise. Something more fundamental. As if his nervous system had received information it could not process through conventional channels. His hands, still spread wide in invitation, began to tremble. The champion's knees buckled without warning. His legs, which had carried him through 15-round wars against the most dangerous men alive, simply ceased to function. He dropped not backward, as knockouts typically produced, but straight down, as if an invisible hand had switched off whatever mechanism kept him upright. His knees hit the canvas with dual impacts that reverberated through the arena. His mouth opened. No sound emerged. According to witnesses, his diaphragm had locked, creating a vacuum where breath should have been. The muscles designed to draw air into his lungs had forgotten their purpose. The heavyweight champion of the world knelt on the canvas, arms limp at his sides, unable to perform the basic function that sustained life. The arena remained frozen. 300 people watched Ali struggle against his own body, fighting not an opponent, but the rebellion of his own nervous system. 5 seconds passed. His face, witnesses said, showed the particular terror that comes from betrayal by one's own flesh. The mechanisms that had served him through countless battles had been disrupted by a single touch. His breathing returned in a slow whistle, like air escaping through a narrow opening. He remained on his knees, head bowed, pulling oxygen into lungs that had temporarily forgotten their role. The referee rushed forward, but Ali waved him away with a gesture that contained none of his usual authority. Lee extended his hand. According to those present, he moved with the same calm that had preceded the strike. No celebration, no acknowledgement of what had just occurred. He simply offered assistance to a man who had, moments before, represented the pinnacle of combat sports supremacy. Ali took the hand. He rose slowly, testing each component of his body as if reacquainting himself with its operation. When he finally stood upright, witnesses noted that something fundamental had changed in his bearing. Not defeat, exactly. Something more profound. Recognition, perhaps. Or recalibration. The champion spoke quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. According to their accounts, he asked what Lee had done. The question contained no anger, no bruised ego. Only genuine curiosity from a man who had thought he understood the mechanics of combat. Lee's response, as reported by multiple witnesses, addressed not power but precision. Martial arts, he supposedly said, concerned itself not with overwhelming force, but with understanding the body's architecture. Where to touch, when to touch, how to speak directly to the systems that maintain structural integrity. Strength meant nothing if the delivery mechanism could be disrupted at its source. Ali nodded. He shook Lee's hand with both of his own. Then, according to witnesses, he made a pronouncement that would follow both men for the remainder of their lives. He told the crowd that they had seen something real. Bruce Lee possessed knowledge that existed outside the conventional understanding of combat. That which appeared to be mythology was, in fact, a science they had not yet learned to recognize. The arena erupted in chaos. Arguments broke out between those who had witnessed the event and could not reconcile what they had seen with their understanding of physical possibility. Some claimed trickery. Others insisted Ali had simply been unprepared for the angle or the timing. The idea that a man of Lee's size could neutralize a heavyweight champion with a single strike violated too many established principles to be accepted without resistance. Lee left immediately. No interviews, no elaboration. According to witnesses, he simply walked out of the arena as if he had completed a routine demonstration rather than challenged the fundamental assumptions of combat sports. He told those close to him that the world would not believe what had occurred, and he was correct. No footage emerged. Despite the hundreds present, no one had thought to record what was supposedly an informal demonstration. The story spread through word of mouth, growing and mutating with each telling. Some versions had Lee knocking Ali unconscious. Others claimed multiple strikes. The truth, whatever it had been, became lost in the mythology that surrounded both men. Ali, for his part, spoke of the encounter only in private. Those who knew him well reported that he would describe Lee's strike with something approaching reverence. Not for its power, he had absorbed harder hits and remained standing, but for its precision. The strike had not tried to overwhelm his body's defenses. It had simply convinced his body that defending itself was no longer necessary. The boxing establishment dismissed the story as fantasy. Journalists who investigated found conflicting accounts, witnesses who disagreed on crucial details, and no physical evidence that the encounter had occurred. It became one of those stories that existed in the margins of sports history, believed by some, ridiculed by others, impossible to verify or definitively disprove. Yet those who were present that night maintained their accounts, despite decades of skepticism. They spoke of witnessing something that challenged not just the hierarchy of combat sports, but the basic assumptions about how human bodies could interact. They had seen mass and momentum become irrelevant. They had seen the impossible become inevitable through an understanding of anatomy that their existing frameworks could not accommodate. The story persisted in whispers and speculation, particularly among those who trained in martial arts and understood, perhaps, that the human body contained vulnerabilities that raw strength could never address. They spoke of pressure points and nerve clusters, of angles and timing that could multiply force beyond conventional calculation. They suggested that what seemed like mythology might simply be science that had not yet been properly documented. Lee continued his film career, never again engaging in public demonstrations that might challenge established fighters. Ali returned to boxing, dominating the heavyweight division for years to come. Neither man spoke publicly about that night in any definitive way. The story became one of those persistent mysteries that haunted the edges of sports history, impossible to prove, difficult to dismiss. Some witnesses went to their graves, insisting they had seen something that should not have been possible. Others gradually began to doubt their own memories, wondering if time and repetition had transformed something mundane into something miraculous. The truth, if it existed in any objective form, remained locked in the memories of those who had been present. What persisted was the possibility, the idea that combat might contain dimensions beyond what the sporting world had catalogued and quantified. That knowledge could triumph over mass. That precision could render strength irrelevant. That the human body, properly understood, could be both more vulnerable and more capable than conventional wisdom suggested. The arena, where it supposedly occurred, was demolished years later. The witnesses scattered, taking their testimonies with them. What remained was a story that refused to die, passed from one generation of martial artists to the next, each telling slightly different from the last. Some believed, others scoffed. Most simply wondered. In quiet moments, according to those who knew him in his later years, Ali would sometimes flex his hand and stare at it with an expression of contemplation. He had held championships, defeated legends, transcended sport itself. Yet something in that hand remembered a night when all of that had meant nothing. When a man 75 pounds lighter had touched him once and shown him territories of combat he had never imagined existed. The story lived on in that space between history and legend, between the documented and the possible. It suggested that human potential might extend beyond what the record books could capture, that there might be knowledge that existed outside the boundaries of organized sport, that on certain nights, under certain conditions, the impossible might wear ordinary clothes and speak in simple terms. About precision and understanding, those who had been present never forgot. Even as the world moved on, even as both men became icons for entirely different reasons, the memory of that night remained. 3 seconds that had contained eternity. A single strike that had rewritten the rules. A demonstration that had shown them something about human capability that their minds could accept, but never quite explain. History recorded the championships and the film roles, the victories that could be verified and celebrated. But in the margins, in the whispers between those who understood that official records never told the complete story, another truth persisted. They had been there. They had seen it. And though the world might choose to forget or dismiss what could not be proven, they knew that sometimes the most profound truths were the ones that left no trace except in the memories of those who had witnessed the moment when everything they thought they understood about combat revealed itself to be incomplete.